Welcome to the show where we talk all things weightlifting. I'm your host, Seb aka the voice of the people, and this is the Weightlifting House podcast. Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of the Weightlifting House podcast with your host, Seb the voice of the people, joined by the people scientist, Joshua Gibson. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about some of the most memorable weightlifting stories that have shaped our lives. Josh, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. And I think I'm made better by the fact that the last podcast we did, which was a fire freaking episode, did really well. So That gets me hyped to record and talk weightlifting with you.
Good. I'm pleased to hear it. So we have compiled a little list of, I guess, some of the moments in our career that we look back on that were either interesting or that impacted us in a way that maybe sort of pushed us in the direction that we're in right now. So I think most of mine are probably experiences with elite lifters. I'm assuming yours are more to do with maybe training camps or coaching, that type of stuff. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's more related to the direct experience of how weightlifting's provided opportunities to like further my role as a coach, to further my role as someone who is, an educational resource, someone who's embedded in the sport. So it's, stories of how I got further entrenched, whether that's, basically moving to pursue opportunities or, I don't know how many of the listenership's going to be new to the Weightlifting House podcast specifically, or even my hand in it. But a lot of those experiences shape, basically who I am and where I am today. So I think you're exactly right.
Cool. All right. So I'm wondering if I should kick things off with an interesting story. And maybe I will actually start off with the first of these, in terms of like how the order in which they happened, in my life at least. So and this is actually a pretty well-known story. Maybe not everyone will know it, but it's kind of fun to recap. It was my experience interviewing Lu Xiaojun. And the reason this was such a big moment was because it was back in 2019, I think it was October, in Switzerland. And I'd only been to travel to one international competition at that point for weightlifting. I'd been to the World Championships in 2019 in Thailand. And I'd seen Lu for the first time there. But for maybe 3 years prior to that, I'd been trying to grow Weightlifting House through podcasts and, I guess, articles. But mainly it was just through interviews. I'd interviewed every English-speaking athlete and every English-speaking coach. And then I was still, or at least Weightlifting House was still at that point where we were pretty small. We were, not at all successful. And it was a massive reach for me to spend the money to go to another competition. So flying out to Switzerland and then being approached by like one of the Lu Xiaojun team, because I think Lu had decided maybe a few months before, I'm going to start an equipment company. This was way before they did shoes. They were like trying to work out, are we doing clothing? Are we doing straps? Are we doing bars and plates? They kind of tried a bit of everything. But they knew that they wanted to move into the Western kind of like market, I suppose. So for some reason, they just chose me. There were other media people there, but they just chose me for some reason. And they said, do you want to interview Lu? And I think I was so like, it was like the biggest opportunity I've had. I think I spoke to you last week, Josh, not on the Weightlifting House podcast, but we were talking about like grabbing every small opportunity that comes your way. That was one that felt like just a massive opportunity that finally came my way. Like I just, it was obvious that this was going to be huge for us. But then the kind of the funny story of it is after I got all the questions ready, it was waiting in this like small cafe next to a training hall in the middle of Switzerland, and just being told like, okay, you have to sit and wait. Eventually we'll be ready and we'll drive to the hotel and you can interview Lu. But no one from Team China can know you're doing this. He's not supposed to be doing any interviews with Western media or anything like that. So you're just going to have to keep this to yourself. So I was sat there and it was kind of awkward. I was on my phone and just, Team China was sat all around the cafe and they're all playing games on their phone as well, on their phones. And then eventually the team starts leaving one by one and I keep waiting. And every now and then I look over at the Lu Xiaojun guy and he looks back at me and he kind of nods like, okay, we're still on. I'm like, okay, cool, we're still on. And gradually the team goes. I think even Lu disappears at that point. And I'm like, okay, this is just, the whole like sporting complex was like the lights were coming off. Like I think the cafe had like one light on at that point. And eventually, basically everybody's gone except a few athletes and the Lu Xiaojun guys. So eventually they beckon me over. So I get up and they're like, okay, everybody's gone, but we've missed a bus. So you're going to have to drive everybody and drive the remaining ones of us back. And I said, that's fine. I've got a small car. We can all fit. But it was a tiny car that I rented. And I remember they said, okay, we've got Shijiong and Li. And I've said this before, so if people have heard this story before, they might not find it as funny, but I remember at the time it was absolutely hilarious, was that I thought they were talking about Li Daiyin, who was like at the time an 81 kilo weightlifter. And it turned out, as we walked around the corner, they were talking about Li Wenwen, who was like 150 kilo, super heavyweight female weightlifter. And I remember I had to say to them, I'm really sorry, but she's not, like, we're not going to fit. There's no way that my car is very small. Like I can squeeze in like 73 kilo Shijiong and like you and the other Lu Xiaojun person, but we're not going to get Li Wenwen in. So they then had to go over and say to her, you're going to have to wait for another coach. And I think the Chinese team like circled back. They were in like the Swiss Alps. They turned around, came back, picked her up. But I'm then in a car with Shijiong, and two Lu Xiaojun people, and I kind of see that as another opportunity, like, oh, maybe I can get another interview out of this. Like, no one's ever interviewed Shijiong before. So I'm asking him questions like, what's your biggest lift? What's your best front squat? What's your best snatch ever in training? He's given me the answers, and I think that's where a lot of the numbers come from that people know about, like 255 front squat, 207 clean and jerk, 173 snatch maybe in training, he said he did. And then I asked him, like, why do you yell Wo Chow? And he says that he can't help it. And then he's like screaming Wo Chow in the back of the car. It's just the most surreal, like, it's like probably 11 p.m. at that point. It's pitch black in the Alps, just screaming Wo Chow. I'm just driving, like, what is happening to my life? Like, nobody knows where I am. This is just surreal. I've got this, like, Olympic champion in the car with me. And then anyway, we finally get to the hotel, park outside, and they're like, she just like gets out and walks off. I'm like, okay, cool. Bye. Thanks for that. I guess it was a massive moment in my life, but it's something that you'll never remember. So that's all good. Although it turns out he did remember it because I actually managed to ask that again later, like years later. But the Lu Xiaojun team, they're like, okay, stay there. We'll tell you when to come in. And I was like, okay. And I remember being sat in this like car park in the middle of the Alps, Swiss Alps. And it's like, you could hear the bells that are on the mountain cows as they were like walking around the fields, but it's pitch black, so you can't see anything. You just hear these like bells. I remember just being in the car thinking, this is just insane. I'm so lost. I don't know where I am, but this opportunity is too good. And then eventually they said, okay, time to come in. And one of them came and grabbed me, took me into the back entrance to the hotel, up like the staircase that's like, the one that you're not supposed to use, whatever, like the fire escape one, so that I wouldn't be seen. And then it's like getting to the corridor, opening the door like a couple of inches, like peeking through, seeing like who's out, like who from the team is around, making sure no coaches could see me come in, and then like smuggling me in. I remember seeing like athletes, just like you would at a school trip, like athletes running in and out of each other's rooms, like playing and like having fun, and like seeing me and being like, what the heck is this guy doing here? And then like sneaking off. And then eventually they like shove me into a room and just close the door on me. And I just walk in and it's just completely empty. And I'm like, okay, I guess this is where I've got to wait now. So I set up a camera and I just sit in there for half an hour, just absolutely nothing, no idea what's happening, can't get out the room. And then the door opens and Lu Xiaojun walks in and he just sits down and they're like, okay, go. Anyway, that's basically the story. and I know I kind of actually, we can't take that long. And every one of these stories, I went into that in way more detail than I probably needed to. But that was the first like insane moment I'd had in weightlifting at that point. I've had amazing moments before that at training camps with you and with Glenn and some amazing people. But with an elite lifter, especially someone like Lu, who I would say at the time was the most famous weightlifter in the world. You know, Lasher was big, but he wasn't big enough yet. But Lu was literally like the most famous lifter in the world. So having an experience with him was just, yeah, pretty sick.
Yeah, I've probably spoken to you more than 99.9% of people who you've ever interacted with. And I don't know if I've ever heard that story in such interesting detail. Like that was freaking awesome. And I think too, you know, the thing I end up wondering, because you mentioned it at the start of the story, is at that point you had been to Worlds, and then this competition was the second one that you went to. Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering why they were so, not like so willing, but so ready to say, okay, you're going to do an interview with Lu. This is the first opportunity he's had, Western media's had. Why Weightlifting House? You know, like, yeah. And I looked at the video. It's got like 150,000 views, but it's not like you'd build this huge brand that would allow them a launching point to use that as an opportunity to kind of take off.
You are right. I'm not quite sure why. I do know that I was with you at the start of September, 1 month prior to this all happening. And I don't know if you remember, but basically that was, well, I know you know this, but that was the trip when Glenn Pendlay died. Yes. And we'd spent years podcasting with him and spending a lot of time in training with him. And that was a very emotional time. And about 24 hours after Glenn died, I don't know if you remember this, we were in an Airbnb and I got a phone call, and it was from Lu Xiaojun Barbell. Yeah. And they were trying to get me to do a collaboration barbell to honor Glenn via Lu Xiaojun Barbell. They wanted to make the bar, but it'd be like a Glenn Pendlay bar, and it was a collab with Weightlifting House or something. It was a very weird phone call, and I didn't really. It didn't feel like good timing. Like, as in, it felt weird that they were reaching out so soon.
Yeah.
It felt a bit opportunistic. And actually, just so people are aware, the person I had the conversation with doesn't work at Lu Xiaojun Barbell anymore. They're elsewhere. I do know where they now work, but I won't get into that. But that's fine. But for some reason, that guy who happened to be then the same guy who in Switzerland was like, "Hey, come and do this interview," it was him who was pushing for it to be me and Weightlifting House, rather than he could have reached out and had a much bigger audience with ATG or Hope Group at that point, because obviously they were way bigger than Weightlifting House was. But maybe he had, and maybe they turned him down. I don't know. It's quite possible that I was like the third or fourth pick or whatever, but I still got chosen for some reason, and I just leapt at it because it's like, it's Lu Xiaojun, and I'm desperate to know the answers to these questions, so I want to be the person who gets them out.
Yeah, I'm wondering. It's almost like that. I see it's the equivalent. You kind of caught Lu at the time when he was still absolutely massive in weightlifting. And it's crazy to think now, I don't know how many people are familiar with Lu and his CV, like what he's done in weightlifting, how successful he was. One of the best of all time. But I think about that interview now, and I don't know how people would take it.
In what sense?
I think weightlifting, it feels like the sport goes by much quicker, and there's definitely less of like this retrospective appreciation for, you know, thinking back when we got into it, it was very much like 1990s lifts, 1980s, early 2000s. And now I feel like it's so much more focused on just present day lifting. Maybe the last few years, but I feel like there's less of that like nostalgia factor, or less of looking at the history of the sport, even 5 to 10 years ago, and having that in the same light as like an Olivia Reeves, Colby Ferguson, all the international lifters who are at their standard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I think if we put if we now did an interview with Lu and put it out, it would obviously not do anywhere near as well. And actually, a lot of new weightlifters probably know him mainly. They don't even know that it's a him. They just know that it's a shoe company because the shoes are everywhere. They're so successful there. But I'm sure most people still, unless you've only just gotten into the sport literally in the last 2 years, basically everyone's going to know Lu.
Yeah.
I would have thought. Yeah. All right. Your turn. What have you got for us?
Yeah, I would say, and this goes along with the conversation about Glenn on the previous podcast we recorded on mine. I think back to that camp that Glenn held at McPherson, Kansas.
Yeah.
And I know did he hold 2 prior, or was it just 1?
I'd been to 2 before the one with you, I think.
Okay, yeah. So you went to 2 camps in McPherson, and I remember kind of in the lead up, I got that like marketing for Glenn's online team. I think initially he had the X Files and it's like stickthejerk.com.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing Glenn like pop back up on the scene, and I was really excited because for anyone who's like a longtime weightlifting fan, enthusiast, competitor, coach, you know who Glenn Pendlay was. I mean, he had an equipment company that supplied many gyms. We have places at the high school that read Pendlay, right?
Nice.
There are bars at most gyms you go to. They have an NB Pendlay bar, needle bearing Pendlay bar. And I remember that was like one of my prized possessions when I was actually able to buy one. And I first recognized Glenn being back on the weightlifting scene when he was on the Weightlifting House podcast, and you both were talking about chickens and youth weightlifting. I remember like I was working my part-time cleaning job, as one does when they're going through. I was probably going through undergrad or something. It was like cleaning houses, working, coaching. And I remember scrolling through, it must have been Apple Podcasts, and I saw the Weightlifting House podcast, Glenn Pendlay, chickens, youth weightlifting. I was like, holy shit, Glenn's back. Like he's back from the hiatus he took with MDUSA, Cal Strength, and like that long storied history that he'd basically built to where he had shaped weightlifting tremendously.
He felt like probably the most famous coach in the world.
Yeah, I would.
At least in terms of his reach, he was the most well known. He wasn't at the most international competitions, but in terms of just weightlifting fans who watched weightlifting on YouTube or podcasts, whatever, he had become the most famous.
Yeah, I guess a lot of that was chalked up to Cal Strength.
Yeah,
like he ended up moving there. What was the club in Texas?
It was in Wichita Falls. I don't know exactly where it was. Yeah. I don't know what it was called. I can't remember.
Yeah, but he had coached like a huge roster of youth athletes, and I think that was kind of like his come up. And then he ended up moving to California, working with Dave Spitz, and started becoming a part of basically that like whole YouTube weightlifting media. But it wasn't like, it wasn't like media today as we know it. It was like Max Out Friday, it's Max Out Saturday, Max Out Monday. It's just going heavy in the snatch, clean and jerk. And I guess they were like also live streaming sessions, and they were just the first to really start to popularize weightlifting on YouTube and training on YouTube and weightlifting personalities on YouTube. And Glenn was a part of that. He caught hold, and then that kind of like helped him develop a team that was really successful at the national level, more publicly, and then transition him into moving to MDUSA to partner with them, which was an equipment company at the time. And I remember like watching that arc, watching everything that Cal Strength had, watching everything that MDUSA had probably 1,000 times over. Like all those MDUSA videos, I've seen them like 1,000 times. And he had a stroke, want to say it was like 2015. It was like, I think it was American Open Finals. He suffered from a stroke.
Coma.
Yeah, went to a coma. And then that like rehab process, I guess, took a freaking very, very long time. I don't know when you two connected. Imagine it was 2016, 2017.
Yeah, it was 2016.
Yeah, it was 2016. And then the podcast had started up. I think the episode I listened to was probably in the 20s. It was somewhere in the 20s. And I listened to that and I was like, holy shit, Glenn is
What
back.
do you mean in the 20s?
Like number 25 or something of
right.
the Weightlifting House podcast.
Yeah, so that would have been like summer 2017.
Yeah, and then I started going back through as you do with weightlifting media. That's freaking awesome. You go back to the start, listen through all the episodes, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that Glenn was back, and he had an online team. An online team that you were helping support, and I freaking reached out as fast as I could. I never really had a weightlifting coach at that point, like really committed to weightlifting training under someone. And I thought, who's better guidance than Glenn Pendlay? So I reached out, started getting coaching from him, and the opportunity came up to fly to Kansas for a training camp. It was 10 days. And I was really hyped by the fact that, I think everyone who listens to this podcast and listens to the Philosophical Weightlifting podcast and has been following our like media arcs for the last, handful of years, the thing that felt most special to me was when Glenn would talk about me on the podcast. He would reference like some crazy lift I would do or a conversation we would have. And I remember that got me really excited and motivated to take the trip out. So I ended up flying to Kansas. You were there, Dustin Baranowski, Seth, Jordan Shepard. Yeah. It was Bob Durant. It was like a handful of really interesting people who came together for 10 days in the heart of Kansas.
Bo?
Yeah, Bo Brown. Yeah, Bo, who's good. Like Pan American medalist.
I don't know. I have no idea if he's done. I can't remember if he's done that, but
yeah,
I saw him at Worlds. He's done very well.
Yeah, he's done very, very well, and it was like an absolute collection of people. And we flew out. We stayed in these apartments that were on Glenn Pendlay's property. So it was his parents' property, and it was pretty expansive. They had like this. It was like a fishery in the back. It was like a bunch of fish tanks. There are chickens in the back, and it was kind of like a double wide, kind of like mobile home style house on the land. And then they had apartments just a little ways away that were some of the grungiest places to sleep. And I remember like
they were basically truck stops.
It's like a mattress on the ground. It's like a mattress on the ground with a sheet.
Yeah, the first time I went there in Christmas 2016, I went with my UK friends, and he put us up in those little truck stop places, and there were some truckers who were stopping there at the time, and there was this guy, and he used to, I don't know if he was there with someone called Scooby, but we kept hearing him going, "Yo, Scooby!" just like waking us up throughout the night all the time, just people turning up and leaving, and like definitely like a lot of law breaking going on in those rooms, but a lot of like, "Hey, Scooby," and we'd just be like waking up like bleary eyed, having had like 10 times the melatonin dosage that we should have had, as we're just trying to get some like proper sleep after the training, and we've had like 5,000 calories of rotisserie chicken, and we just hear this like trucker guy yelling.
Yeah, well, and I think that's one of the things. It's always reading the fine print, right? Because Glenn would say, like, you pay $500, you come out, you're fed, you get all your food, all your lodging taken care of, and you're like, holy shit, that's a deal. And then you get there, and Glenn, I have this one vivid memory of him. He was cooking. I think he was cooking eggs, and he had a gas stove, so there was an actual flame. And his vision wasn't great because he had a stroke and it impacted that. And I just look at him, and he's got this like Pam cooking spray, and he sprays it directly into the flame. The flame just shoots up, and he's like, "Whoa!" And of course, like Glenn's probably used to it at this point, so he just puts the pan back on the flame and it just goes on.
Honestly,
like nothing happened.
His beard was probably legitimately on fire for a few seconds. He's just like patting his face to put it out.
And that's I think that encapsulates the entire stay, right? It's just like these like kind of quirky things. I mean, he would have, and I love Glenn. I remember
in my room, there were legitimately, I would say, and this is coming from someone from the UK where this is very strange to see. The room that he would put me up in like the nice big house after a while, because I was like, I was like his go-to guy. Yep. He puts me in a room next door to his, and there's no joke, probably 300 to 400 bullets just all over the floor, all over the bed, in every cupboard, in every drawer. And I'm just like, I've never even seen a bullet in my life. And it's just like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Like, but that's just rural Kansas, I guess.
Well,
it was crazy.
I love that Glenn he was just so himself, right? Like I remember I was thinking about our rowing exchange we had, because we picked you up from the airport, and the first thing I kind of remember talking to you about, we somehow started talking about rowing, and you mentioned your best 2K time. It was like 6:30, right?
Yeah, something like that.
It was like 6:30. I just remember it
was pretty decent.
Yeah, and I was like, I could definitely do that. And you're like, no, you can't. I was like, no, I could definitely beat that. And that like whole thing morphed over time to me like maxing out my 2K in the gym. But I remember Glenn would max his 2K row like every day. That's all he did for training. You know, his
only goal was to go under 7 minutes, and he never did it.
He never
I was
did.
like, Glenn, just periodize your training a little bit. Like, let's row some 5Ks. Let's do some 500-meter sprints. Let's do like a program, and guaranteed you'll go under 7 minutes. Because he would hit like 7:04, 7:19, 7:10. He was right there, and he was just like, no. I was like, Glenn, you're just doing the Bulgarian method for rowing.
That's exactly what he was doing.
And you know that that's not the way that you train your weightlifters. So do your like weightlifting training style for rowing, and you're going to do it. But he refused.
He wouldn't do it.
I mean, that wasn't amazing. Yeah, that trip, 100% influential. Definitely a good shout for the podcast.
Well, and all those little details, all those little like colorful aspects of it, we just trained our asses off. Like we trained really hard. I remember we trained. I mean, it's double
3
days.
times a day.
Yeah, we trained a lot. We trained a lot. And the thing about it, and Glenn, this is how much Glenn loved weightlifting, and I think tells a lot about that camp. We'd be sitting there. It's a Thursday. Do you guys want to go to the gym? It's like it's not. Hey, we're gonna train in the AM and train in the PM. It's like we're sitting there. It's like let's go train. It's like what are we gonna do? It's like we'll do some percentage lifts. You show up, and it's like I'm just gonna max out. I mean, like I got a guy next to me who's snatching. And I'm gonna snatch 1 kilo more, and then he's gonna put 1 more kilo more on, and then we're just gonna end up battling for the best snatch, clean and jerk.
Yeah.
So it was a hell of a trip.
It was, yeah. That was obviously incredible. Yeah. Yeah, everything with Glenn was very transformative for me, for sure. Okay. Let's do a bigger name for the day. Let's go Karlos Nasar. Weightlifting House training apparel doesn't just look great, it feels amazing too. With a 4.8 star rating across thousands of orders, our clothing is loved by lifters around the world. Every piece is designed from scratch using premium technical fabrics, lifter-friendly seams, and obsessive attention to detail, which is probably why we've collaborated with Olympic champions like Lu Xiaojun and Karlos Nasar. Every item has a story. Experience the quality yourself at weightliftinghouse.com. Click the link in our bio or visit the site to get your next piece of weightlifting apparel. So I had a recent trip with Karlos in October of 2024. And we went and I flew out with Nate Sawinski, who was known for back in the day, he made YouTube videos where he would go and max out in like random university gyms and get, hundreds of thousands of views doing it. And now he's our YouTube editor, and he's extremely good at it. And so he flew out with me, and we went to do this documentary on Karlos, which we'd kind of been filming for a while at that point. We were covering his full 2024 year because he had some big goals. He wanted to be the first Bulgarian to ever win a Europeans, an Olympics, and a World Championships in 1 year. No one had ever done that before. And there aren't many things that a Bulgarian weightlifter has never done before because they were such a strong team. So that was amazing that he was going for it. And he'd already won Europeans, he'd won the World Cup, he'd won the Olympics, and now it was just the final training camp before the World Championships. So it was an amazing time. And, we were out in this place called Belmeccan, which is just up in the mountains, 3-hour drive outside of the capital. Really kind of like you're quite high in elevation, like it's very moist in the air, there's a lot of rain, but there's also a lot of beautiful sun, pine trees everywhere, you're on the edge of a mountain, just stunning, but also very like Eastern European style building, like but just amazing. But one of the moments in there that I remember distinctly, it's rarely like the training, it's the more human moments. And it was in the evenings that we'd do double days training. Well, we'd film, and then we'd all have dinner, and then we would meet downstairs for like tea and then games. They drank a lot of like, sometimes it would be black tea, and then sometimes it would be like fruity teas or whatever. And we'd sit down, we'd have a nice hot tea. A bunch of them would go outside, have a cigarette, because a lot of Bulgarians do that. And then it was like, Karlos was like, okay, let's play some games. So I remember playing table football with him. I think in America you call it foosball. And what he didn't know was that, like, I grew up playing that game. Every day I would play that game. Me and my dad would play every night for like years. So I was like legit at this game. And when I went to like high school in the UK, once we got to a certain age, we had access to one. And I remember I would just like essentially like hustle people to play. I'd just like win like 20 cents here, 20 cents there. Just like win us, like, you can pay me if you want to play, like you pay. And if you win, I'll give you double the money back type of thing. And if not, I keep the money. So I would just stay on for just like hours and hours playing people. I just love table football. And, but for some reason, the way we were doing it, we had to play 2-on-2. Karlos was like 2v2, 2v2. So it would be like me and Nate versus them. And I think we won so many games against Karlos, but he was so like funny and childish how he would like, if he got the ball and he's in defense, he'd be like, okay, wait. And he would like back off, and he'd like interlock his fingers, stretch out, click everything, like turn his head, like get all the clicks in his neck. And then he would like try and line up one shot from the defense all the way through like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines basically of defense between him and the goal. And then with all of his might, he would just spin his thing as hard as he could and just try and hit the ball. And obviously, like, inevitably, he would just not even get past the first line of defenders. And he'd be like, oh, and he'd like be like so close. And then one time he did it and he nails it and it goes in. And he just like turns to the camera, does like a double biceps flex. He says meow, because he always says meow for some reason. And then he just never let that go. Like every time we were talking about it, he'd be like, but I beat you. And even on camera a few times, he was like, well, I beat you. And it's like, but you didn't, but okay. And then we would play pool. And again, pool is another game that I played a lot of. And he just has no idea how to play. So he's like, his left hand that you're supposed to like plant on the table, which is like so important. It would be like floating. Like he would just have it like hovering in the air like a centimeter, an inch above the table. So just no stability. Would like hit the cue ball and just like not even like scuff the cue ball so it goes in the wrong direction. I remember him like trying to do it where you put it behind your back to play and just miss. At one point, I'm pretty sure I saw him when he thought no one was looking, just grab a ball and move it.
Wow.
I was like, Karlos, you can't do that. And then it's probably like 11 p.m. I'm tired, like it's time to go to bed. And he's like, table tennis.
Yeah.
So he grabs this like Bulgarian 800 meter like national champion, and he's like, you're on my team. And Karlos is so famous, like all the athletes there just want photos with him, want to hang out with him. So it's him and this 800 meter runner versus me and Nate. We probably played for easily an hour. And then it was like, I said to Nate, like, we need to go to bed. Like we've got a lot of work to do tomorrow. So eventually we left, but he and this guy just carried on. They just stayed playing and playing and playing. And he's just so competitive. He just wants to play every game, and he wants to get more and more people playing. And he wants to like up the stakes constantly. Like he does sleep a lot and he does have naps and he eats really well. But if you get him playing games, he's just like, he's not competitive in a bad way where he gets upset or moody if he loses. But it's like, let's play again. Let's go again. He just won't stop. He just wants to constantly be competing in things. So yeah, that kind of moment didn't shape my life, obviously, but I look at it so fondly to have that level of access with the person who is now the face of the sport, at least on the men's side, the most recognizable face, the most exciting person in weightlifting. To share that time with him was amazing. And that's kind of like the peak, you know, someone opening up to you, I think, is when you're messing about playing games like at midnight. So yeah, that was a fun one with Karlos.
Yeah, that was definitely like seeing him, you know, outside of the context which so many people know him in, which is literally just the platform and just Karlos as a competitor. I mean, like a pure weightlifting competitor, one of the best in the world. And I wonder, you talked about it not really having an impact, but how much did that Karlos trip impact Weightlifting House as a whole?
I think it did a few things. One is it kind of spending all that time with him and then working on the Nasar range that is now out was really great, because obviously now we've basically, I say locked into, doesn't sound very nice, but like he's now basically signed as like doing things with Weightlifting House, which is amazing for us and it's amazing for him. I mean, he, like, I'm never going to release the numbers, but like he does really well from us. Like every month we send him, rewrite him a check, and it's like, gosh, he really almost has to do nothing except just continue weightlifting. He doesn't post anything. He doesn't promote anything. I mean, since we've launched the Nasar stuff, I don't think he's made a single post on his Instagram account where he's training. So like he doesn't have to do anything. And yet people just want to wear his stuff. They like his clothing. They want to have his belt, all that sort of stuff. So he does really well from having that relationship with us, which is great. And then also it was one of the first like fly out, spend loads of money in order to create this like really cool piece of content. And I still think that Karlos documentary is the best piece of weightlifting content ever made. Wow. I really believe that. And it's almost like it's not even close. Like maybe you could say, oh, but there's an Iron Mind video that's more impactful. 100%. Because like there was nothing out there to watch. But in terms of like the best made piece of content, there is nothing better than that. It's like an hour and 15 minutes on the Weightlifting House YouTube channel. It's so good. It's so well produced. It's so in depth. It's just incredible. So I think creating that, regardless of what came back as a result of it, the fact that I can hand on heart say I think there is a new best video in weightlifting makes the whole trip worth it for me. Got a great relationship with his team. Litkov, I absolutely love. I adore Litkov. His manager, Atanas Litkov. Well, manager, friend, trainer, physio, like a bit of everything really. Carer, like just love the guy. And it's just a memory, being out there for a month, I'll never forget. Or for a week, sorry. And what's also fun is like when we go to competitions now, there's just a expectation that when they turn up, we'll all meet up and like hang out, and they'll be like, okay, this is when we're going to train. When you're going to, like, they love Nate. So they're like, when's Nate coming to film? Like, can Nate come over in the morning and film us eating breakfast? Like, we just have really great access because they saw us put in so much work to create this documentary. Actually, I should have maybe mentioned in that one of the most amazing moments was on the final night. We did like the sit down interview and it kept getting later and later and later. And it was probably about 10 p.m. We went back down to the gym. All the gym lights are off. We set up like our small lights. We put 2 chairs there for the 2 of them to sit. And we had 2 cameras and we sat there and I interviewed and Nate was checking on the cameras and everything and the lighting. And we interviewed them for about an hour and a half. Interviewed Karlos and Litkov was helping translate. And towards the end, I knew we were going to have an emotional thing where we finally talked about the death of his coach, his mother who'd tried to commit suicide, him living on the streets when he was younger, not seeing his father for years, all these very difficult things. And he had been asked briefly about these sorts of things on like, news, when someone shoves a mic in your mouth, in your face, like, tell us about your coach dying. And you just give a stock answer. But in that like extremely quiet training hall with just these small lights on, and Karlos basically started crying in that interview, not like weeping, but like tears coming down, had to look away, bite his lip sort of thing. And then I remember it sort of ended on that emotional note. And I kind of like, as I do to sort of signify the end of something, I sort of clapped, rocked back on my chair and was like, brilliant. Okay, thanks. Amazing. Well done. And all of us kind of knew like that was absolutely magic, that moment. And we all stood up and Karlos said, you're the only person to ever get me to cry. And I was like, okay, wow, that's amazing. And then he said something in Bulgarian, and Litkov translated it, and he was like, it's never going to happen again. And like, we all laughed, and we all like high-fived, everyone hugged everyone, and it was like, okay, we've wrapped it up. That was it.
Wow.
That is the end of the interview portion of the documentary. We got the most real responses from him. That was definitely an amazing moment. Yeah. That's actually the second time I've been with an Olympic champion who I've made cry, because Ilya did it as well.
Yeah.
But we can save that maybe for later in the podcast. But yeah, that was a sick moment, actually. That should have been, but that was actually more impactful than the playing the games. Definitely.
Yeah. Where does
getting Karlos? Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the interview with Lou and Ilya and Karlos, and I mean, at this point, you just have interacted with so many of the world's best weightlifters, who aren't only the world's best weightlifters, but they kind of hit this this crossing point of the best competitors in the world and the biggest personalities in weightlifting, or the most kind of like personalities in the limelight. Where do these kind of rank? Where does that like Karlos experience or Karlos trip rank out of all of your experiences in weightlifting now?
If I could go back and do any of them again, I would do that one again. Yeah. Because like the Lou one is like, it was an evening, and I'm just stressed about even like paying for a flight to get home. The Karlos one felt like, I know we're going to make something amazing, and we're just living with these guys, and they fully bought into the fact that we are people they're going to be working with for a long time. We're going to give them access to everything. Karlos would be like, I'm going to go get my haircut. Do you want to come? And we'd drive down into the city, and we'd all go and get haircuts together. And then we'd all go and get coffee together. It was like a full, like, okay, we're all hanging out. And the thing with Karlos is he's actually an extremely generous guy. I remember at one point, I didn't have enough money, and I needed some money. And Litkov was like, oh, Karlos can lend you some. And I said, okay, that would be really kind. Thanks. How much? They said, how much do you want? And I said, like $100, because they understood US dollars. So it was like $100, whatever that is in Bulgarian would be great. So Karlos gets out, like, he has like one of those like man bags, like, he opens it up and there's like a wad of cash, and he just starts counting out money, and he hands it over to me. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, and I said, thank you so much. And I said, wow, this looks like a lot of money. And then Litkov looks at it and he's like, that does look like a lot of money. And he just checks it. And already Karlos has said, don't worry about paying me back. And I was like, no, I'm going to pay the $100 back. He's like, no, don't worry about it. And I was like, no, I will. And Litkov looked at it, and Karlos had misunderstood what he said and thought there was an extra zero. So he'd given me $1,000 US dollars worth of Bulgarian cash. And he was going to be like, don't pay me back.
Yeah.
And it was just like, obviously, and then I gave 90% of it straight back to him there. And then I was like, no, I only need $100. Like, I just need to go and get some food for us or whatever. But like that sort of thing, like he's just so generous, so kind, very deep, not at all like the cocky, arrogant, jacked kid that you think he might be. Like, he is very cocky with his abilities, but he's also the best in the world.
Yeah.
So no human can do what he can do. So like maybe that's justified. And maybe it's needed to get to the levels that he's at. I don't know. But like he's also very friendly, down to earth, and very humble at the same time.
Yeah. That's incredible. And that seems like, that trip, it seems like it's so expansive, just flying out to stay with him seemed absolutely beautiful. I mean, and so special.
So yeah.
So I can see why you'd want to relive that 1,001 times. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. God, these podcasts, we've not got long. How long, you need to go in a few minutes, right?
I do, yep.
Yeah, we might have to just wrap it up.
We should do a part 2, yep.
We're going to have to. I wanted to do watching Ilya's career highlights with Ilya.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about going to Colby Ferguson's high school. I wanted to talk about getting in the sauna with Rizky while he predicted that he was going to beat Rahmat 3 months out.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about going to Waffle House with Olivia Reeves. And I wanted to talk about filming Lasha wearing our stuff. But we'll have to do that another time.
That sounds great.
But the fact that we covered Lou, Glenn, and Carlos.
Yeah. That's the
If those are the only
weightlifting trifecta.
It is. If only those 3 names are mentioned, then it's a good episode of the podcast. That's for sure.
I agree.
Yeah. I guess we got to end it there. Damn. Okay. All right. Well, guys, go follow Josh. Josh_PhilWL on Instagram. Philosophicalweightlifting.com. Is that right?
That's correct.
He got the domain. And if you want some expert coaching, go get it from Josh. He's absolutely incredible. He knows his stuff. He takes a lot of care with his athletes. I have no idea if you have any space to take on any more athletes. You're probably the most busy man in the world that I know, so I might have just done you a huge disservice. But Josh can always say no. So ask him if you want it, and he can always turn you down. Go check out everything at weightliftinghouse.com. And that's going to be it from us. We appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you all on another episode of the Weightlifting House podcast.